It's now time for Word Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world. And Adefemi Akinsanya is here. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Ruben. Good morning, Aya. Welcome
Good
back.
morning. Thank you so much. Good morning, Adefemi.
How's everybody doing? I'm not too bad.
Okay.
Not too bad. Good morning to you viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, let's start in the United States. US lawmakers have once again met to investigate killings of Christians here in Nigeria. There was a roundtable discussion which was held on Tuesday in Washington, D.C., which focused on the United States' next steps for addressing the severe crisis of Christian persecution in Nigeria. Now, the committee heard from leading members of Congress, including Riley Moore of West Virginia, Chris Smith of New Jersey, and Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida. Other experts also in the room included Dr. Ebenezer Obadare with the Council on Foreign Relations, as well as ADF International's Senior Counsel for Global Religious Freedom, Sean Nelson. Let's take a listen to what Mr. Nelson had to say.
This is a real opportunity to stop, in large measure, one of the worst persecution situations in the world. And if resolved, it will be of immense social, economic, and security benefit to Nigeria, Africa, and its global partners, including the U.S. Too many times we've said it's too late, we waited too late. Here, we do not have to wait until it is too late. We can act with a real chance of success right now.
As always, an incredibly insightful, timely and important discussion taking place regarding Nigeria within the US Congress. We did also hear the comments from Hartza and her talking about the need for collaboration with the Nigerian government, the need for collaboration and really a cooling and coming together of all heads. Very interesting topics for us to discuss later on after we continue with the World Brief. Now, moving on, but still staying within the African continent, 74-year-old Aniset Ekane, he is Cameroon's opposition leader and founder of the African Movement for New Independence and Democracy. He died on Monday while in military custody. Now, he was arrested on the 24th of October after post-election protests following President Biya, who is 92 years old, I might add, his re-election. Now, he was charged, that is Ekane, with hostility against the state and insurrection. Now, his family and his lawyers say that his health collapsed due to lack of oxygen and medication, and transfer to a civilian hospital was denied while he was still incarcerated. Now, President Biya has ordered a probe, but opposition groups as well as civil society groups and the EU delegation have condemned what has happened, condemned this loss, calling for accountability and a release of all detained protesters. Well, moving on now, over towards the United States, and former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez has been released from a U.S. federal prison after President Donald Trump granted him a full, unconditional pardon. Hernandez, who led Honduras from 2014 to 2022, was sentenced to 45 years back in 2024 for conspiring to traffic over 400 tons of cocaine and for weapons charges. He's also accused of accepting money to allow that type of drug to go. Now, the pardon Trump gave him essentially contradicts Donald Trump's own criticism of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who he believes is complicit in narco trafficking, and of course his issues with fentanyl and other types of illicit drugs coming into the United States. Well, moving on now to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine and the United States have worked out a 20-point peace plan. Zelensky says that the draft is more viable, but no official 20-point document has actually been publicly published as yet. There's even reports that it's only 19 points, so we'll have to see. Meanwhile, US envoy Steve Witkoff is slated to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin today in order to present this revised plan. Now, European and US officials have been cautioning that core issues such as territorial claims, NATO membership, security guarantees remain unresolved, and the Kremlin has not even publicly acknowledged any 20-point proposal as yet. Well, before we come over for comments, let's take a look at newspaper headlines from across Nigeria and indeed the world. As ever, we begin with the front page of this day. And this day does lead with reports that President Tinubu has praised troops for boosting national stability and has urged better unity and pledged better welfare for security forces while donating 200 million naira to the Armed Forces Remembrance Fund. The president also met with security chiefs and has directed them to intensify strategies in order to continue and win this fight against insecurity nationwide. Now, also on the front page of this day, we do see at the top there, Enugu State Governor Peter Mba has presented Enugu's 1.62 trillion naira budget for 2026. It focuses on infrastructure, agriculture, education and health. It will be funded by IGR, federal allocations and capital receipts, building on strong 2025 revenue and boosted by President Tinubu's economic reforms. Let's move on to the Vanguard. Vanguard reports that US lawmakers, as we've just seen, they have disagreed with the Nigerian government holding a closed-door briefing, accusing it of downplaying violence against Christians. Now, they've cited mass abductions and church attacks and called for sanctions, visa bans and conditional aid. That's just one portion of the conversations being held in that closed-door meetings. The Daily Sun, however, looks at reports that EU Ambassador Gauthier Mignon says that Nigeria is going through perilous times due to rising insecurity and must strengthen national unity by eliminating indigent settler divides and ensuring equal rights and opportunities for all citizens here in Nigeria. Well, the Daily Trust, let's take a look at that, has President Tinubu's comments. He has nominated, as we've already discussed earlier on the show, Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Wabi Musa as Nigeria's new defense minister, citing confidence in his ability to strengthen the country's security. The Daily Independent this morning does report that the Senate is considering a bill to create a single toll-free emergency number nationwide to replace the multiple numbers and helplines in order to improve Nigeria's emergency response. Now, lawmakers are saying that this unified code will speed up rescue efforts and strengthen security reporting. The New Telegraph weighs in on the Central Bank of Nigeria, ending its cash policy exemptions for embassies and donor agencies. From the 1st of January 2026, individuals can withdraw only 500,000 naira weekly, and corporates can withdraw 5 million naira, with higher withdrawals attracting fees. ATM limits are set at 100,000 naira daily and 500,000 naira weekly, while special withdrawal waivers have been scrapped. Let's move on to our UK papers. We've got the Daily Mail first up. And the Daily Mail has MPs in the United Kingdom announcing an inquiry into all royal homes owned by the Crown Estate following public outrage at Andrew's so-called peppercorn rent at the Royal Lodge. That is according to, firstly, the Daily Mail. But The Sun takes a little bit of a different story. Let's take a look at the Sun this morning. Now, The Sun says it's best to start saving as soon as possible because World Cup tickets will be the most expensive ever seen. Well, those are your newspaper headlines and your World Brief. I know I'm going to be saving every penny now in order to afford a World Cup ticket. Well, these are your stories. Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, now the World Cup tickets are expensive. Remember, they also told us that having a ticket doesn't mean that you'll get a visa either. So this is probably going to be one of the most difficult World Cups to get access to. But on more serious note, Cameroon. Yes. Very unfortunate to see this demise of Anicet Ekane, which the opposition are describing as an assassination. But of course, what we do know is that he was incarcerated by this regime, and this followed the declaration by opposition leader Issa Chiroma Bakari, who did a self-proclamation of his victory in the just concluded presidential election in that country against long-term President Paul Biya. And, it follows sort of the inspiration from somebody like Raila Odinga in Kenya or somebody like Nelson Chamisa in Zimbabwe, who all decided that they felt they had won the people's vote and they declared themselves people's president. Anyway, Bakari himself has escaped to Gambia. I believe the First Lady of Gambia facilitated his safe passage to Banjul. But now you still have political prisoners, such as Ekane, who was instrumental in creating that opposition that rallied around Bakari in the last election. Just reading Bakari's statement or obituary on the passing of Ekane. He says, you haven't broken a life, you have risen up a people. Today is day 2 of a shutdown that's currently happening in northern Cameroon, where they've just decided to desert all the towns. Public transport is not moving. So the resistance continues, but it seems like this death might even reinvigorate them into more action. And then very lastly on Russia, these developments are happening as NATO is supposed to meet today. And for the first time in 2 decades, the Secretary of State from the United States will not be present. Marco Rubio will not be at the NATO meeting. And it seems the focus is all on Russia and Ukraine, as Steve Witkoff continues to push for a deal in Russia, Ukraine. Quite significant that the US is sending a message that maybe NATO is not so important to them.
All right. So on the US Congress meeting around the claims on Christian genocide in Nigeria, targeted killings of a particular group, and upholding the freedom of people to exercise and practice their faith without fear or of any reprisal, is one that is for me, it still highlights the fact that from a Nigerian point of view, we're heavily relying on the US to take the lead on this. And I'm not talking about the security aspect, but or the presidential aspect, but the legislation. I say this because when the US Congress had met initially, we had highlighted the role of the Nigerian Senate in not just opening an inquiry, but also taking action by either, through its position in checks and balances, also by setting up committees to ensure that they're able to look into this matter deeply. But unfortunately, what we see is that whilst the US continues to progress on this and continues to make, to advocate against any kinds of killings against Christians, against terrorists or terrorists in Christian communities, we haven't seen that much action on the Senate part. Yes, they have had meetings. The House of Representatives has had, debates on the floor. Yes. But most of what has come out of those debates are just highlighting the issues that we're already aware of. But in the area of action, we haven't quite seen such concrete action. Or in the area of even inviting people who are affected by these claims come to the fore to speak. And I think this is where I would like to highlight this morning around this particular news. But yes, they're still in conversations, and this will advise the president, or at least help the president have a snapshot of what is going on and see what the US response will be. Sure. However, with regards to responses, I must commend the President Tinubu-led administration in how they have responded to this with regards to actually taking up responsibility. Some people have argued as to whether or not, or if the US had not spoken, whether or not, if we are facing a challenge and something is able to trigger or catalyze a response, then absolutely fantastic. Excellent for Nigerian citizens, and hopefully this communication around a joint response by the US and Nigeria would be most welcome. Finally, I would say, with regards to assistance, there have been debates as to whether or not should we receive US assistance, should we accept it for a sovereign. The truth is that if you are in a precarious situation at any point to save and secure the lives of your citizens, whatever you need to do, you do. But you must come to the table with your side of the bargaining chip and see to what extent the US will come in and when Nigeria takes up. But Nigeria must, and I insist, continue to lead on this conversation and not let the US come as big brother and take over the conversation.
Okay, let's cut through the chase. Now, on October 31, President Trump gave the directive to the chairman of the Appropriations Committee to say, go and investigate what is happening in Nigeria before I send the guns a-blazing. There was a session, which we reviewed before. Yes. There was another session yesterday that was chaired by the deputy chair of the Appropriations Committee, Bahat. And then persons were invited from the Foreign Relations Committee and also from the Appropriations Committee, and then some religious experts. Now, by way of summary, they resolved that one, that there is terror in Nigeria, religious persecution. The Americans say, oh, we need to go and protect Christians in Nigeria. Of course, opinion is different about that. I've said, we are all victims here. All these parachute analysts, they probably do not quite understand the reality on the ground. But another thing was that they say, oh, the Nigerian government is not doing enough. What we know, those of us who live here, is that the Tinubu administration is making efforts in all directions, in many directions. The government has declared its national security emergency, is changing personnel. The administration has also recommitted to to ensuring the safety of all. Number 3 was something that came out of the conversation, that, Boko Haram is responsible, there is jihadist terror, where many people will agree with that. But there was a point made by Ebenezer Obadari of the Council on Foreign Relations. And he was saying that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and I think it's an important point, should declare the adoption of Sharia in 12 states of Nigeria in the north unconstitutional, where President Bola Ahmed Tinubu does not have such powers. And that is a fact. He does not have such powers to the extent that the Sharia law is enshrined in the Constitution, sections 257 to 279. It is there in the Constitution, under which Sharia courts of appeal are created. Now, it was a major issue in the 1978 Constitutional Conference, the details of which are properly documented in Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka's book on religion, power, and politics in northern Nigeria. And the whole spirit of it is that Sharia law is for personal orthodoxy. It deals with civil matters. It has civil jurisdiction, not with criminal orthodoxy. Now, if you go to those 12 northern states and you say, President Tinubu wants to cancel Sharia, you will even further complicate the system. So if anybody is making such a suggestion to President Tinubu, I don't think he should go in that direction. What he should continue to focus on is this attempt to ensure the security and safety of everybody. Those who are making that recommendation, they will further explode or implode this country. That's my major, takeaway from that session. But it's interesting that the House of Representatives of Nigeria is also going to have its own second session today on the same subject that the Americans discussed. Because at the end of the day, the solution must come from within, while we listen to what outsiders say. Quickly, on Hernandez, where I find something interesting there too. His wife seems to be the most excited. His wife, Anna.
Do you blame her? Do you blame his wife?
Anna, okay. You have answered my question. Because she's been very grateful.
She would be. She would be.
That this husband that has been away since 2022 is now coming back.
If they were Nigerian, they would do Thanksgiving.
That's on the lighter side. But the point is that President Trump is using this to gaslight the Biden administration. He's in fact saying that the Biden administration was envious of Hernandez being president, whereas the whole issue was about drug.
Yes.
And that it was a major, chieftain of drug trafficking. Yes. And that was why when he was convicted in 2024, he was even asked to pay about $8 million. What I see here is the hypocrisy of President Trump. The same President Trump that is going after Nicolas Maduro for exactly the same reasons.
Yes.
As recently as yesterday, he has even deployed the Iwo Jima amphibious military. He has deployed the NNS, that's Nigeria, Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world.
Yes.
And he says Maduro should resign. Now he says Hernandez is innocent just because it was the Democrats, that went after him. So the Democrats are, of course, disturbed, and they are saying President Trump is just being hypocritical. But as I began with, his supporters in Honduras, they are happy. But Honduras is going into an election,
yes,
and President Trump is also involved in that. Yep. He is supporting the right-wing politician. The other guy, Salina, he says that one is a communist and all of that. So this is the kind of funny things that you find in international relations. As for Cameroon, blame Paul Biya, because this is a post-election thing, and now a man has died in detention. The EU delegation to Cameroon is saying every other person detained as a result of the election should be released. The man that just died, Kane, his only crime was that he was a supporter of Chikari Bakari, Issa Bakari, yes, who is on the run. Yeah. So you find Paul Biya at 92, planning to die in office, still clamping down on freedom of expression in Cameroon. And I think that the international community generally should speak up, not just the EU delegation to Cameroon.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Adefemi Akinsanya.
Thank you so much.
We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.